Шановні гості, розпочинаємо.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start the platform number 4, Education and Family, how to meet modern challenges. And we would like to invite the moderator, Marina Bardina, the Member of Parliament of the Ukraine and servant of the People fraction, co-chair of the Equal Opportunities Caucus. Now we would like to invite Hanna Novosad, Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. Ines also member of the Parliament of Ukraine, Holos faction, co-chair of the Equal Opportunities Caucus. Mr. Volodymyr Sabel, member of the Parliament of Ukraine, Holos faction. Sergei Nijinsky, Deputy Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine. Marina Poroshenko, Head of Supervisory Board, Ukrainian Cultural Foundation. Zoya Litvin, founder of the NGO Osvitoria. Anastasia Slusarenko, head of Lviv Regional Plast Organization. Olena Anapriyenko, head of the Center of Medical, Psychological, Social and Rehabilitational Support of Okhmadi, the Children's Hospital. So, Marina, the floor is yours. Thank you, and greetings to everybody. This is my third time, and this year I'm not the participant, but this year I am a moderator, and I'm very thankful for this. And it's very interesting. For me, it's an interesting experience, especially to be the moderator of the educational panels. So, well, I'm very glad that we have the experienced specialist in education, so they understand what does it mean gender equality in the sphere of education. So, in our family relationship, I wish to have a very fruitful discussion to all of us. And first of all, I would like to say, and to say a few words and to react on the previous panel. And I want to commend some special things, and I would like to apologize that I will take a few minutes to share with my comments. First of all, we are preparing the ethic code of our fraction, people voice, just to avoid the gender discrimination, just to avoid sexism in Parliament. Also, we registered the specific draft law on counterparty discrimination and on the following the rules of ethics in our Parliament. Mr. President Zelensky supported the quotas in our voting code, and also he sent his proposals just to add some ideas from his side, and that regarding the gender of members of parliament. Also about the inclusion of parliament, we rose this question. So, and I hope that in the coming few months we're going to make the audit of the premise of Parliament, and also we were talking about the special maternity vacational periods, and also we're also interested to involve men to provide them with the maternity vacation to take care of their kids. So, let's continue. So now I would like to invite Mrs. Ina Sofsun. Nina, a very experienced person in the educational issues, and you know the sphere quite good. And so we want to hear from you what we have to do as the members of parliament in this area. So thank you, and good evening, dear colleagues, and glad to be here, and I'm glad that so many people are taking special attention to the gender equality issue. Why? Because I think for a long period of time the issue on equal gender equality was a kind of a what we call marginalized issue. And I'm very happy that for the last few years the situation is really in the way of changes. So, well, and we finally found the way to talk about gender equality. The gender equality is not about who would be the first to open the door for whom, but the idea is how to provide the so-called justice in the society, how to provide the equality of the thoughts and the desires of all the members of the society. So I'm very happy that we have this Ukrainian Women's Congress for the third time to be established. So, well, and it's very great that we have this discussion on the gender equality level. Now, as for the panel ideas, just how to provide the gender equality in the world. And I would like to pay your attention into the four specific ideas, especially dealing in the educational area. So first of all, in the context of education, what we are paying attention on, that the different achievements between men and women, girls and boys. And we got, for the first time, we got the results of the monitoring survey, and PISA and Ukraine participated for the first time, and based on this survey, we got the results. And what does it mean? What is the results of PISA? So we do have the differences between girls and boys, and some different things in the reading. So in the subjects of natural science, about the same. So, well, math, the boys are better in the critical way of thinking, reading, etc., the ability to analyze the text, etc., then the girls are much better by the results. And why it happened and why, and what do you think it's correct or incorrect? First of all, what we have to pay our attention. It's not the result as, for example, the talents of the girls to read. I think it's because of the culture. We got this culture through the system of the school education. And it's a kind of because of the rolling models, and it's the also foundation because of the different behavioral model from the side of teachers, because they say to read is okay, but it's not especially focused for boys. So for girls, it's okay to go to the museum, to the theaters, to read, etc. But it's also it could be engraved into the way of the cultural way of life. Taking into consideration, we can say that really the girls are reading more often and they can get the better results. But unfortunately, later on, they are not in advantage to have the best positions. Those who are not reading good, they are unfortunately taking the best positions. But at least we have some differences in the results. And just to change this, we have to change the school system. We have to find the talents from all kids. We should not provoke the typical behavioral models. We have not to push to follow this so-called models, behavioral models. We have to determine this problem first. The determination of the problem is to say that the results are based on the survey of the girls better. It's not because they are better, but because of the specific approach from the society. So we have to pay our attention for the specific training level of our teachers. So teachers are like a specific key figures in the establishing of the general stereotypes. In our society, we are not explaining how to behave correctly regarding the gender stereotypes. And I do hope that we can implement this strategy on gender equality in the world. So, well, I started to deal with this issue when I worked in the system of education of Ukraine, but still the document is not approved yet. But the strategy would be such a nice push to disclose these issues. The second block for our, I am the teacher from university. That's why I used to speak about 2 hours, but I will try to do as brief as possible. Socializing through education. This is the second point. I know that this is not scientific approach, but based of my experience. I'm a teacher for more than 10 years at the university. What I can see among the students teach the politological science. You have to get the specific knowledge. You have to have the analytical skills. You have to understand how to express your thoughts, your visions, etc. What I can see at the university, if you're asking the specific questions regarding the literature, what, for example, the circle of literature, and always say yes, the girls, and then when I'm asking, what do you think about this? Then the men, the boys are raising their heads. And the third point is the third issue. That's a kind of a career growth in the educational system. The majority of our teachers, they are women. And in our high institutional level, a lot of women are working there. So well, but unfortunately, in fact, we don't have much rectors of the universities. The PhDs are also not so widely spread among women. So well, if the person, a male, working at school, that means that this male could reach easily the position of the director of the school. So this is the problem which exists, and we have to cover, we have to discuss it, and we're talking about the internal view of the system. We have to admit that we do have lots of glass obstacles, or what we call the glass ceilings, and so we do have lots of other issues. The idea is how to understand how this existing system, educational system, really influences onto the gender equality. Our school works until the middle of the day, so normally the classes are finished till 1-2 p.m. So, well, if, for example, the class is finished, and then what's going on? So that means that the kid could be taken back home, and 95% among that parents who are coming to take their kids home, they are mothers. And also we do have another problem. So we have kindergartens and the working hours till 4 p.m. That means that it's decision making process, and it's also connected to the decision because the parents, they should make a decision to have a short working day just to take care of their kids. It's also, we have to understand other structures, working structures in the world, they also influences on the gender equality. So, well, this is the fourth block of the issues. When we're talking about the implementation of the gender equality, we have to take into consideration this above mentioned issues. And this is the fourth block, and we have to remember it. And thank you. And talking about Q&A session, I think let's speak shorter, and let's provide to our participants better chances to answer questions.
So, Ms. Novosad, thank you for participation, and we've started discussing those PISA ratings, which were mentioned by Ms. Sovsun. Do you have any kind of understanding how to deal with this? And the question also in terms of gender strategy in education. Greetings to everyone. Thanks for being late. You know, traffic jams have no gender orientation, so sorry for that. I'm not going to repeat the most obvious things within this community. It's not a secret that education is such kind of chain in our life which can either drive or not to drive some stereotype. Often, as we speak that our citizens, regardless of their gender, should have one very important competence, which is critical thinking, and be responsible and be self-conscious. And we speak it in a so confident way, but when we see what our system of education does, it does quite the opposite. For example, let's talk about critical thinking, which is now extremely important for new Ukrainian school, for the responsible citizens communication. If we observe the case as the grounds of family life, which was kind of, very important with the educational community. It's not about the critical thinking. For me, as a minister and a citizen of this country, it's crucially important that any kind of formal organizations or state institution where the person can get, we shouldn't have any kind of doctrinizing, because this school should be the place where critical thinking is promoted, where some complex social issues are discussed. We are not keeping silence, we are not making them taboo, we are not imposing anything, and when we give a chance for such educational courses, which have, I would say, some destructive character, probably it's my personal opinion, but anti-discriminative procedure was not passed by it, so it does harm to our girls at schools. You also wanted to speak about this, Marina, as I remember, about this basics of family or foundations of family. So we have recommended to stop delivering our previous recommendation on implementation of this subject, and now it is passing the additional expertise. So probably because now it is introduced in hundreds of schools and it does a lot of harm to children and to everybody, I guess, and it's not acceptable for the school. Secondly, we would like our citizens to be self-conscious, self-aware, especially the girls, to have more opportunities in their life. But when we observe PISA indicators, we would see, and Ina mentioned that we deal the worse with mathematics. Girls have even worse results in comparison with boys. This time we didn't have any, I would say, ground analysis for the mathematic competence. If we can see the OECD in average, these results, based on some cycles of education, of research by PISA, girls, due to their anxiety, when they are afraid of mathematics in general, they lose at the testing like 34 points. What is 34 points at more than a year of education? It's equal to the year of education. So the girls, just because of their anxiety, because somebody told them that this is not female stuff, they actually have worse results. And as OECD manifests, it starts from the nursery school, and if to observe the educational achievements, they are equal, but if to add the anxiety, so the results drop down like a year, and it means, as for the first time, we see the full picture of Ukraine versus the rest of the world, and for us a kind of ringing the bell that we should work with women's self-awareness in some educational subjects, and this is a huge work with teachers for revealing those tendencies and individual support, even, I think, for and foremost for the girls. And very third important message mentioned by Ms. Sovsun, that we as government would like to target preschool education, because when the government says that we need like 40%, it's impossible to introduce 40% without workforce. Somebody has to work in this country for the increase of economic development, and we have a couple of problems with this, of course. A lot of people immigrate, and the workforce, substitution is not occurring in most of the cases. So where is this additional hidden resource? This is 4 million of women, roughly, who don't work because they bring up their kids. The Economic Strategy Center had the poll, and these 4 million of women who were questioned, they say, I would go to work if I would have better opportunities to take care of my child. So this is our welfare. This is a part of our national welfare, which can help our country expand. So preschool education, more open, more access, more places, better quality. I think this is a top priority for our government and all of the governments after us. And one more thing, sorry about the strategy. I am totally supporting that this issue, which we actually started, which the previous, even the previous, before the previous government, which was started, and our government needs to finalize it and to try and use and adopt this gender strategy in education. Thank you. And we had a lot of objections from some stakeholders. We respect everybody's opinion, but I believe that for our society, that some things should be just not the subject to discussion. We are not a religious state, we are a civil state, and the system of education should serve the purposes of the state. Thank you for this personal leadership in terms of promotion of strategy. Ms. Litvin, you are a kind of example of breakthrough of educational initiatives, modern educational initiatives, and I would like you to share with your experience of what is new education means, and this award that you are actually initiated, and your traditions, your family traditions. I would like you to share some experience of bringing up your son, basing the gender equality conditions. It's very nice that you've mentioned the family, because after Ms. Ina and Ms. Anna, I didn't know what to talk next. And I would like to start with the fact that education is the best investment for the family into their children and of state into its citizens, and whatever beautiful and nice strategy for gender balance will be, if the people observe something else in education, if there are some other values within the family, it will be complicated to influence it by the legislation. It will be a very long-term and less organical than via the education. So when we speak about gender equality, this topic, I think, caused me a kind of anxiety, and people, the organizers told that I can call here, I can talk about this here, because very often I've met those people for whom gender equality, it's like positive gender discrimination, and it's not very nice. So if to talk about the equality, Pani Ina mentioned this Ukrainian school systems, and I work within it. 96% of employers belongs to women, totally dominated by women. The school headmasters, more than 50%, they are women. It's majority of them. And a very nice presentation about test PISA, and there was a hypothesis from Ms. Solson that this is a kind of role model which are propagated to boys. I would like to say that the literature program, it was made by women, it was agreed by women and for women, so this is literature program is not interesting for the boys, and the boys, for, if I'm not mistaken, 36%, there is a gap with the girls. And this is not very nice, and we should work with it, basically. And this is something which was important to highlight, that equality, it should be equality. It should not be towards this or other side. Even from my personal experience, my son's reading program, the teacher of literature is a woman, and when she made the additional part, which could have been included, they were about the girl's first love, something like this. Of course, the boys are not interested in it. They would like to read about robots, artificial intelligence, fantasy, science fiction, and this choice is minor because the program is composed by the woman, and we need some equality here as well. Thank you. And if to talk about the award, it was actually not gender initiative, but this is initiative that our society calls for, because educational superstates, they are, as a rule, have very high respect rate to teachers, and our award, Global Teacher Prize, this is a part of the World Award, and we also brought this project into Ukraine. And you know, nothing works better than role models, than some success stories, like benchmarkings. And the task for our award is to demonstrate who are those new teachers of Ukrainian school who could be used as role models. And these are, of course, the teachers who are advocates for love for their job and equality, and the family, the third aspect. And the previous speakers mentioned of the prolonged working hours. It's very important, but what is more important, these are those stereotypes or values which are within the family. For example, today I'm here up to 6 o'clock and my son finishes school at 4, so my husband today is supposed to pick him up, then to bring him to the dentist, and then they go home while I'm busy with my stuff. It was my choice to have active life and to work. And if our women will have the opportunity to understand that there are such chances to communicate to our husbands, and our husbands will hear you, it's not an important what are the working hours for the kindergarten or for the school, if the family has the opportunity to talk. And one more question about the award. How many men actually participate there? I think it's very proportional in terms of this education, like 8% of our applications are from men than from women. But the first year we had like total gender balance. We had 5 versus 5 men, male, female. The second year, a little bit of more women, but the winner was the man. And the last time, the third time, the winner was the woman. But I am objecting that here there should be some quotas. We should choose the best one. And we have a lot of them among men who survived in this educational system. I am not going to comment one more time why it is bad when one gender is dominated within the profession. And when I was growing up, my perception of gender equality was much influenced by success stories from successful women from my family or from the families around us. And I think in education it can also be the key, because personal example is very important. Ms. Marina, thank you for your role in what is going on now with inclusive education, because for the recent years you have been promoting this question. And I would like to combine your the question to your private experience and professional experience. Is there any correlation between inclusive education and gender in terms of your activity? And the second question deals with your family. How are you raising your children, and whether are your children free from gender stereotypes? Thank you very much. I would like to remind one more time what gender policy is. It's about equal opportunities and rights for both men and women. So equality is the key term here, which is typical to inclusive education too. So equal opportunity to access to high-quality education for all the participants of this educational process in the long life perspective. And here we should deal with this question in a broader context when, since the childhood, we show our children to be around diverse people and get used to diversity and not to pay attention to their race, their psychological or physiological peculiarities, or something what is connected to religious belief, to the other language. everybody is equal. Everybody can communicate. Everybody is within the same environment. Everybody is brought up together, is respected by each other, and help each other. And only then we have a chance to bring up the next generation, which is not going to treat some peculiarities and differences of one person from each other. And within these conditions, we, the next generation, we should try to observe it as tolerant and much more progressive. And of course, as it has been mentioned by other speakers today, most of the teachers who work in schools and raise our kids, they are women. And it is extremely important that gender and inclusive policies to be treated at the level of education, as everything depends on the educational curricula which will be introduced in our schools, and those subjects, those courses which are delivered, they will influence greatly how what are the basics we are going to lay down in terms of bringing up of our kids, how we're going to find and include this diversity, what is interesting for ladies, what is interesting for men, how we're going to combine those issues together to prevent the formatting of stereotypes and biases among kids, because our kids, they are small adults. They grow up. Yeah, they have such a peculiarity that they grow up, and then they will be starting their own life as formed personalities. And the major factor here, what are those personalities that we are starting to raise? It is extremely important to have a very tight family connection. As we understand, if you just observe the person with special educational needs who has psychological or physiological peculiarities, regardless whether it is lady or a man, we know that all of the burden of taking care for such a child is carried by the mother, by the woman. And if the state provides such opportunity to raise the kid in equal opportunities with other kids, with children of the same age, we also give the opportunity to develop to those women who can then try and manifest themselves not only in social aspect but as professionals. They can make a career, they can make money, which can be used for the support and for the raising of the kids. And by this, we make our society more secured, more universal. If to speak about my personal, my family, my personal context, we have 4 kids. And I would like to highlight that we have total gender balance in our family, because we have 2 boys and 2 girls, and even the grandchildren are a boy and a girl. First and foremost, when I was bringing them up, the basics for it was the bringing up of the personality, regardless of the fact whether it is male or female. Because in the 21st century, it is very important to bring up free, independent individual who can actually take care of himself or herself, not only in a professional way, but both in everyday life, in daily routines. Every person should be convinced of his or her capabilities and competencies which he or she got during the education period. And only then, actually, those children, when they grow up, they communicate at equal basis, and they are not, I don't know, say that you should do the washing and you should do the cooking and I should go and bring home the bacon and support my family. Everybody does what he or she can, and these educational principles to exploit the strong parts, to develop those strengths, it's extremely important, because it's not necessarily a girl should be raised in a way as a princess and tenderness. And if she is born as a warrior princess, for example, on the other side, a lot of boys, they are more attracted by some scientific work, or they would like to become, they see themselves as chef at Michelin restaurant, and this is very good. So if people would respect and the competencies, the personalities of each other, it will be the more universal society. And I am very thankful that today we raise those issues here. And I would also like to mention and to highlight one aspect, that the difference in age is extremely important, because when we bring up our children, we don't have to be like on top of them and say and talk to them as mentors from the top, from the peak of our age. We should be equal, we should try to be friends, and then they're going to hear to us. They are going to try and take into account the things that we say, and we will not be indifferent to each other. And only when all of these aspects of equality we are going to implement, we can count for very qualified results and to bring up the noble, competent, professional, and free individual and the member of the Ukrainian society. Thank you.
Thank you for this very motivating sample of the gender equality in the family. So, Mrs. Olena, so we are talking about how to raise the very special personality, but not girl or boy. So, well, we mentioned that we still do have this role-less approach to raise a boy or girl. What to do, just not to influence onto this raising process of the personality. What to do for the best, as Mrs. Marina already mentioned. What is the a real impact from this side of the family. Good afternoon, dear participants. Thank you for inviting me for this very important event. And it's a very pleasure for me that I'm the representative of the medical sphere. So, well, I am the representative of Ahmedid. That's the medical center. So then let me start from the family problems. So, well, some kids are asking for the support because of the lack of the gender equality approaches. And gender equality is one of the aspects of the family raising traditions. So, well, the first institution, social institution, is family. So we have to start with the adults, because adults, they are the sample, how they respect each other, what is the attitudes to each other. So we already rose the questions regarding the protection, domestic violence, legal protections, etc. So, well, we still face the same problem. So, well, and from our practice, we do have lots of applications from the kids, those who are victims of the domestic violence. And the first, even those perpetrators, they are men. And then this lack of support, lack of protection, consensus also depends on gender's approach. Everything depends on this specific way of authorities, etc. So authorities in the family, Mrs. Marina, and etc. already told that this is very important to have the very friendly relationship in the family. So we have to respect each other. We have to understand each other. We have to respect each other despite of gender. That's this family is a social institution. I mean, this family really forms the attitude towards the society. Everything starts there. So that is why I'm paying your attention, because the violation of the principles of the education is also can be influenced on the self assessment of the person. It's also could be an obstacle to make the career. It's also leading to neurosis and other psychological problems. And the education in the family is extremely important issue. So I would like to pay your attention on the family as for mainly the social institution. So how to enforce, how to really enforce this family structure in our society. It could be kind of a training platform to train the free of charge platform, training platform for the parents, for them to have the psychological support, etc., educational support. So maybe to get more information, more recommendations in case of problems, where to apply, on whom to ask. As for the gender equality, you are talking about stereotypes in education. So we're facing this problem. For example, we had the case when the parents came, and then the father said, "I was bitten when I was the kid, and I will do the same to me." So the kid suffering from neurosis because of it. The kid was focused on the sport activity, but this approach formed a kind of a fear for the kid, and the kid become to be scared, for example, of specific boxing activities, to even coming into the boxing arena, etc. So we shouldn't deal with the stereotypes like you are a boy, you shouldn't cry, every person, no matter girl or boy, they have emotions, and they are thinking, and they are feeling, and it's very important to accept the kid with this personal impact. So we have to understand what is the personal attitude. So we have to understand that in case of, for example, disabled kid, we have to take into consideration this. We have to be patient, we have to be supportive, and I want to take your attention on this thing that we unfortunately face the problem with the emotional weaknesses, and it's also emotional weaknesses leads to the unsuccessful realizations, to all that problems that the Gadanism is also the very special focuses, and so it should be a balance. It should be the balanced understanding. You have to understand what type of efforts you have to take, and etc. So we have to understand what is the really the impact from mother. So if the woman making carriers, it takes time. And everything time, what is the main resource? And the time is a kind of a psychological thing. It's the psychological health of our nation, the participation of a woman for the process of raising the child. So, this woman's impact is important, and it's proved through the different scientific articles. It's not new, but the very important things to give the opportunity to woman to realize in her profession. A woman should understand that her kids are under care, that her kids is under the support, and her kids has the teachers, and she, as a woman, has this opportunity to realize herself in the society. So thank you. So what about you, Vladimir? So well, I know that before joining the parliament, you've been actively working on gender equality in your company, and I think if we're talking about the discussion about gender equality, we have to welcome men to participate. So that's why I want to greet you again. So, well, today you had the meeting at the parliament level of the issue on the specific relationship between fathers. So what is the real role of the father in the process of raising the child? So thank you for inviting me. So the participation on the raising the child in Ukraine, the father's participation should be even better, much better. That's all well. What is the result now? The result is that we do not have enough attitudes from the side of the fathers to the process of raising the child. It's the impact from the different stereotypes. It also depends on the specific social, economical reasons, and quite often fathers, those who are even eager to participate actively in this process of raising the child, they cannot do this. Why? And I observed some researchers, and I observed the research, and it was the fund of the population of the earth, and they just, showed the specific data on this figure. 70% of the male, they seriously think that the role of a woman to be a housewife, just to support comfort in the house. At 63, they think that the main role for a woman is to take care of a child, to cook, to take care of the house, or whatever. And also, they also provided the specific facts and figures that the average father spent 22 hours with a kid, and the mama, she spends about 49 hours with a kid. So, well, just to combine and to compare, it's interesting. So, well, 2/3 of the people, they think that the decision-making process should be based on the decision from the side of the man. Why it happened? Why fathers quite often, why they are so vulnerable from this stereotypes. So that's 3 reasons. That's the establishing of the stereotypes. First, there's family education, family tradition. That's the, we have to counterpart, but it's the standards, traditions. The second, that's the educational system. The educational system also the area where we can counterpart with the stereotypes. We have to cover the kindergarten, we have to observe schools, etc. So everything starts from this small thing. So, well, we have to understand that that it should be not a separation from the girls and boys. Some teachers, they say, it's not yours because you're a girl. Some teachers says like that. So, well, this is the boys thing. You have to move, for example, the table because it's man's thing. And I remember from my school, so we had the so-called special professional skills lessons, and we were involved into this so-called handmade handicrafts or whatever. So, and it was mainly for male. And we are starting again to deal with the stereotypes from school. And in many businesses, it's absolutely obvious that the gender equality is the kind of economical advantages. So it proved many times that the companies where they have the equality, gender equality, they have better results in their businesses and income. So in these companies, they are motivating by themselves this activity. They are stimulating the equal salaries for both for men and women. They are motivating the equal opportunity for women and men. And they are motivating the equal accesses for the process of raising the kids in between men and women. So well, I've seen a lot of companies in Ukraine, those who are practicing the better European experiences. And so a few years ago, I started to deal with this, and I found that a lot of them dealing with this. Why I'm telling you, when we say about stereotypes, the stereotypes could be destroyed. When I was 24, I started to getting rid of all that stereotypes. I started to work with the different things, and I've seen that it's possible to be a father, to take kids home, and it was normal for me. And talking about the education, this is the same situation in the country. Gender equality is not only the correct way, but it's the very profitable way for the country. A lot of countries, they are starting to fight for. And economical reasons also, it's a very influential things to push the educational system to get rid of the stereotypes. I'm talking on behalf of men, male, and everything should start from the education of our teachers. So our previous panel discussion where, remember we were talking about the training on gender equality for members of parliament. Yeah, members of parliament is okay, but this training course also should be a part of the training process for our teachers, and starting from the secondary school and up to the high school. So well, we have to understand how to distribute the goals, how to delegate the responsibilities, how to deal with girls and boys. So we know that there are lots of special joint teams, etc. So everything should be reflected on the so-called studying process of our educational system. And I think fathers they will get the advantages to have the better attitudes, and they will get better enjoyment from the process of raising the kids, because it's a wonderful enjoyment to raise your kid. Thank you so much.
So, Sergio, what about paternity leaves? Are we going to stimulate this? So thank you first of all for the invitation, and I would like to start with the fact that I will use not gender-oriented statement. Successful man cannot exist without successful woman. And the matter is that, for me personally, the role of a woman in my life, it is such a sensitive question, because since my childhood and the forming of me as a personality and as a leader, it was done because my mom, and who knows gender inequality in career, but in a very way, in every way, and also my sister, who is a combatant. And now it was kind of hard for me to speak in terms of women leadership, because we often hear some skeptical ideas in society and those stereotypes that my colleagues mentioned, when there is a certain, I would say, stereotypical ideas about where the man should work, where the woman should work. And I would like to say that it depends on the man, the formation of his stereotypes towards other men. And the role of a woman, of course, is colossal in this, because since your childhood, your mom, your sister, your grandmother, these are those key figures in terms of forming of this person's personality. And when we talk about the issues connected to forming the caring society, such kind of society who should work for its needs, there are three basic aspects. The first one, what the state does to solve the question of gender equality as a key question, should be at the level that every boy could say where he works, how he works and how his personality is formed. The legislation initiatives are extremely important, because you've touched the question on the initiatives and what is actually going on in policy formation. Our meetings on committees, on subcommittees, and our constant working groups in the Ministry of Social Work, the basic statement is that some rights for men and women, they are like the most burning when we start the discussion. And if previously a man had a right to take a paternity leave, but he was ashamed of this, and to use to write this in his application form. And if there are some men full of initiatives who are not afraid of being discussed behind their backs, so there won't be the change in men's psychology. In terms of the feeding of babies and having these initiatives for allocating some extra time and extra facilities for breastfeeding, this is the key element to our initiatives. And of course, you know, the draft law in terms of the labor and the employment center now will be within the Ministry of Economy competence, but we have already transferred it to the committee and to the working group in terms of the labor code and the law on labor. And I'm convinced that they are not going to disappear, and all those initiatives which were supported by you as well. When we talk about the social stereotypes, when I came to the Minister of Social Policy, and being a man who is responsible for gender equality question, where only 10% of men are actually working and 7% of them are within the regional perspective, I would like to say the following. It's not about the remuneration, probably small salary in comparison with other ministries. It's also not the case with other biased attitudes. The case is with the philosophy of this particular man. And until the time where still Soviet Union-oriented approach is going to this, that boys should play with boys and girls with the girls, we will never see the society who is ready to work with gender questions. I would like to also to say that the Ministry of Social Policy, of course, first and foremost does the audit within its ministry as well, and the audit within the authorities to find out where the gaps are in terms of gender-oriented policy formation. We know that international institutions who take gender approach for their human resource is a key one, And according to the information of the UNO and UN and Women, of course, when we select the applicants, women dominate. But I disagree with the fact that there is a kind of bias or there are some things which violate men's rights. I think the man's initiative, his leadership skills, and his psychological conditions, they form the vision of the gender equality from the man's perspective. And until the man is taking the paternity leave, and until the man is spending much more time with his children and talking about this not only with his son but also with his daughters, and by stipulating to the format boys communicate with the boys and bring up the boys, this is not quite correct in its root. And I say that each of us should ask themselves or herself or himself a question: how do I form my personal policy? Because the change of generations, not only in the country, not only in authorities, because now in parliaments we have like 25% of women and 35% of women in executive authorities, but it doesn't form the diminishing policy for active men and the lack of leadership qualities within the man's environment. There is a gender equality up to the labor selection and up to the approaches, because if the person is a leader, it doesn't matter what gender it is. Recently, I came back from Geneva when I raised a question for Istanbul Convention ratification, and because of certain pressure, we had to drop this question, and we were afraid from the point of view of some, political issues to raise and to speak up. I am truly convinced that those norms and those regulations within the Istanbul Convention, as for the rights and equality, which is discussed in Europe, should also deal with Ukraine too. And my final statement that next year, it will be the anniversary for Beijing Declaration, 25 years anniversary, and the Minister of Social Policy will be actively participating in forming the plan of events and initiatives in terms of preventing policy and forming the society with the respect of the human rights. And on the 10th of December, when there is an International Human Rights Day, the dignity and the honor will be the priority for Ukraine in implementation of any regulations and preventive policy. So gender is important, but human rights are the most important. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sergio. We have a lot of discussion around Istanbul Conventions. We try to monitor the question, and we have 20% of women, but the government does better than the parliament. Anastasia, apart from education and family, the personality is influenced by their extracurricular activities, their participation in different organizations. Here's a question comes. Plast, this is modern patriotic bringing up. Do you take the gender aspect and gender opportunities into account when we speak about Plast participants? Thank you for your question and for your invitation and for the opportunity to talk about Plast in educational background.
So we're talking about the educational equality. So, well, Plast, it's the very popular in Lviv, and we're talking about the patriotic education. We do have about 3,000 plus participants. They are dealing with the patriotic education. So, well, they are just dealing with the different age. And so we have 10,000 of members of our organization, about 4,000 outside of Ukraine in the Ukrainian diaspora. So, well, our organization was established 107 years ago, and it was established non-profitable non-governmental organization, and the main idea is to educate the Ukrainian youth. The main goal of BLAST is to educate the very responsible citizens of Ukraine, to make them helpful for the society with the projects and with the activities, just to be very helpful. And PLAST is dealing with the improvement process of the society, and this is the highest mission of the PLAST organization, to make the country better. So, well, we have the great love to the motherland, and we have the great respect. The mutual respect is very important things. It's the very important thing of PLAST is self-educational activity. When our participants, members of our organization, they are thinking about how to self-educate themselves. So, well, let me verbalize the figures: 667 hours, about 76 years. Every year, our volunteers, those who are 18 plus, they are taking care of the kids, and they are educate them out of the classes. So additionally, so we were talking about the inclusive education, but we were talking about the so-called alternatively approaches to out of the schedule educational programs. So we have lots of camps, art camps, sports camps, and the PLAST organization is providing the very practical skills. So PLAST or the members of PLAST organization, they are providing the very interesting skills for the kids. And during this process of education, they get the skills of human management skills, the responsibility skills, and PLAST teaches just to apply the knowledge practically. So practical skills is the main focus of PLAST. A very interesting aspect of PLAST is patriotism. Patriotism, in our understanding, is the education and the process to educate and to raise the love to the country. And this is through different aspects to speak about the different subjects, discuss different historical dates, etc. So, well, out of schedule education is important, and it gives a chance to the older kids to understand, to the youngest, this very important thing. So plus the scouting, scouting was the kind of a background, and PLAST based on the scouting. And the first idea, Scouts movement was established for male, and Baden-Powell, the sister of him, rose the issue about the equality, and in 5 years after they established the scouting for girls. And now PLAST, as well as the other scouts organizations, they are gender equal. All the PLAST students and all scouts, they are equal in their opportunities and in the attitudes towards each other. So I would like to ask you to be as brief as possible. So, and PLAST and the methods is the equal methods, equal approaches. Our boys, they can cook, and our girls, they can cut the trees. It's super normal. And we have a so-called internal atmosphere of acceptance each other the way we are. We are asking each other and calling each other you. It doesn't matter how old you are. We are educating the personality first. This is the approach towards the personality. So we have the same rules and the same demands to each other. And just to close up, I would like to say that PLAST is the youth organizations, which is very influential for the rising the Ukrainian youth, and the goal is to expand our organizational activity all over Ukraine, despite of the fact that eastern or western regions they are. So, well, I am thankful to So we have the very special word. So we would like to give a word to another speaker. We have the special address, but we do have the question. So, well, unfortunately, we do not see you in our panel. Svetlana Wojciechowska, member of the Parliament of Ukraine. And we've been talking about the family values. So first of all, I would like to express special thanks for your positions. And as the lobbies for gender education, for me, it's very nice to hear all these results. And I would like to prove that for next year, we'll organize the 4th Ukrainian Women's Congress. And we will cover the gender strategies issues definitely, yes. So we'll have a lot of things to be discussed. And when we're talking about the gender strategies, I'm supporting this strategy, I'm lobbying this strategy, but for today's Congress, opportunities inspire. This is the slogan. That means that you have a chance and you have the opportunity to make the educational process to become the platform, let's say, the platform of the equal opportunities. The equal opportunities should become the so-called social ideology. Social ideology is also formed from the side of family, education, etc. So ministries are creating the laws on the adults' education. Education as it is so well strategy. It's not a small tool. It should be more expanded version. So it takes a long time, but you have the opportunity to start. Could you tell me, are you available to do it, and what type of support you would like to get? At least we'll see. You will see, the results will show, but we are available and we are ready to do it. So we have lots of things, and discrimination, you understand that to evaluate discrimination we can use lots of indicators, but the equality for me, PISA's tests shows me that the inequality in access to the well-quality education. Inequality is the thing. So we live in Kiev. This is quite rather rich city, but we do not know what's going on in the region. But PISA's results showed us that we do still have the differences and the opportunities. So the rural areas, school kids, and these big cities, that's the results different, and the differences in the development in education is about 2.5 years. So, well, if we're talking real terms, 2.5 years for the rural areas, kids to reach the same level of education. So we have to start from this 1.5 million of kids, those to cover their needs, and this is one of the main priorities for us. And
we have too many questions to the minister. I think let's have 2 questions more, or just collect all of the questions and then give the answer to all of them all together. Hello, this is Odessa region, the city of Kilia, small town. I am Alia Kolekция. I am editor-in-chief of the local paper, and I would like to comment on the following. On the 25th of November, we celebrated the International Day for fighting against the violence against women. For 16 days, there was a kind of action in the schools, whether the system of education allowed to come to schools and to comment about the social issues. I would like to tell just a very tiny story. When my friend was going home with her daughter, and a small daughter approached them, and another girl approached them, and she actually asked them to take her home. They started the conversation, and the girl said that she goes to godmother's home, and she started to tell small child stories, and she told the story that when she brought a small kitten home and the father took the kitten and just hit him to the floor. And now she is afraid of bringing kittens because the father is going to kill them. And mostly she's afraid that her father is going to kill her because the father says that the trash from the house cannot be carried. And my friend said that, okay, keep to the point, please. You are not right. You are supposed to talk that what is happening, yeah, so people can help you. I would like the system of education to act in such a way that instead of I have the 8 years old daughter, I have the son. Nothing is mentioned in the school. There is some kind of labor classes, I and the world around, but nobody actually speaks that the girl, the child is not protected since a very early age within the family from his closest people. And I would like to change the system of education and to direct it towards it. So I thank you very much for your sincerity and for your sensitivity. It's not about the hours for studying something. It's about new Ukrainian school, the teachers as partners, and the trust between the teacher and the partner. And if the pupil has some problems, he can speak about this to a teacher. To have it as a separate subject, I don't think it will be helpful. I think it will be just manifested as the same family basics. Yeah. Do we have some more time? Sorry that I'm breaking up your scenario. I would like just to collect the questions and then to answer them all together with one response. Okay. I wanted to ask the question for how the Ministry of Education is going to work with religious communities who influence education greatly and how to counteract this, because a lot of religious groups, they are now registering as non-governmental organizations, and we as civil society here in this room, we are ready to be your partners to counteract those gender, I would say, bias or influence, which is coming from a very non-educational institutions. So we have a lot of stakeholders in our society, plus different religious groups, and it's okay, and it is the right to be. But in my world, the school is separated from religion, from church, from any other religious kind of influence. This is my personal belief. And it should be reflected, I think, in the content of education. So this anti-discriminational expertise we started in 2017, and in the full scale, it should be strengthened. And within the context that it should cover not only the textbooks, which are printed thanks to our taxes, but to any other educational materials, which is recommended by the ministers, because these 100s of curriculums are not passing as expertise. And if there is a mentioning about some propaganda of separate religions, it's just only about one religion. So even in this case, there is no equality. So in my opinion, it should be just one point approach. The school is separated from church. Okay, we cannot make a round of questions for the second time separately. Okay, so
interruption, but I invite you to have your special comments on this panel discussion, please.
I'm not sure it's working. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. And I want to thank, first of all, the organizers to be here and to be able to address all the participants and the panel members also on behalf of UNICEF. I was very pleased and encouraged to hear some of the points that were made by some of the panelists. And what I want to share is basically how UNICEF sees basically gender equality and education. So for us in UNICEF, it's very clear. It starts at the family level. And it's basically starting by creating a bias-free environment. And for us, it's critically important that both parents are part of childcare and child development. And when I'm saying both parents, it's obviously also including fathers. It's really critical in order to address gender barriers to have the fathers also involved into the childcare and the child development. Further up, for the parents, it's also critical to continue to foster gender equality within the family and address some of the barriers within the family. After the family, obviously, we have the external environment, and as part of the external environment, we have the society, but also the education system and the government, obviously. For us in UNICEF, it's also very important that the education system is structured in a way that it's of quality, but also addressing gender equality issues. So we are really pushing very much in all the countries where we work for the stereotypes to be addressed through the teachers' capacity development, but also through the content of the curriculum that is being taught within the school. Equally important is also for UNICEF, for the government and for the business to invest in family-friendly policies. And I think some of the panel members mentioned that as well. So it goes from basically having affordable and accessible and quality childcare, that includes also preschools, but not only, to have also child grants for parents, for all the families, to be able to address some of the critical issues that they have in raising up their children. But it's also looking, obviously, at parental leave. And I was pleased to hear that the Ministry of Social Policy is looking into that. Paternity leave is as important as maternity leave. Finally, another easy win, it's the breastfeeding policy. For UNICEF, it's very important that the government addresses breastfeeding policies within the government, but also obviously within the labor market. So for us, again, investing in family-friendly policies is good for the families, for the businesses, but also for the economy and ultimately for the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Laura, and I'm very thankful to you for this.
Дуже дякую, пані Лора, і це прекрасно, чудово, що ми співпрацюємо з ЮНІСЕФ, і так що у нас є ці бебі-бокси, і ми з Сеул.
І називати, кому ви адресуєте питання. Бачу руки там.
So, well, the questions, we're coming back for the questions. Maria Dmitrieva, feminism, you are radical feminist, and I do have the question. So we've been talking about the Convention on the Human Rights, Beijing platforms of action, and the last week we had the 70th anniversary on the conventions on the counterparting of the human trafficking and sexual business, so, and also counterparting prostitutions, etc. So last week we had the 40th anniversary on the conventions on liquidations of the CEDAW convention. So, and my question is, the last half a year we've heard a lot of ideas regarding the legalizations of the prostitution. So, well, if we legalize prostitution, then all the efforts on developing the gender equality would fall. So, well, all that ethnical minorities, kids, etc., other kids would be the victims of this. What is your attitude towards the process of legalizations of prostitutions, and maybe what do you think about the Swedish equal model towards this very issue? So, well, dear colleagues, who would like to answer? Let me express my personal point of view. So, for a few years, I already says that we have the Swedish model. What else? So, that was the question towards the panelists. As the panelists, let me answer. Dear colleagues, me personally, I am responsible for the policy to counterpart not only human trafficking, but the domestic violence that we mentioned before. And and today is the 16th day of the specific activity, which has the name of the counterparting of the domestic violence and domestic abuse. And then we're dealing with the action plan, and we are building the communication with the region. Counterparting the domestic violence, it's one of the main priority of the activity of the Ministry of Social Policy, and it's one of the main issue of the Ministry of Social Policy. As for the model, I support the Swedish model, and we've been talking a lot about this on the different committees with our members of parliament. But I also would like to say that the involvement of the representatives of the publicity, the representatives of the international organizations in this mechanism of establishing of the special policy towards this counterparting against the domestic violence, building the shelters, regional shelters, the call centers, establishing. Now we are not ready to announce the launch of this project, but it's in the process. But we are ready to launch this mechanism, and the thing is how to form the database on a regional level and how to deal with the training of the specialists. It's not the last issue for us, but it's still in our priorities, and you'll get a lot about these initiatives. We will announce it from the side of the government quite soon. So, next question, please. Good afternoon, dear friends. I'm the deputy from the Zaporizhia Council Equal Opportunities Interaction Group. So, and I have the question to Mrs. Poroshenko, because I'm just really seriously thinking about your future pilot projects regarding the inclusive things, and it's great that you pay the attention of the society to the kids with needs. And I want to say that these stereotypes from the side of the bureaucrats, the obstacles really influence badly for your kids, for your image, because everything involved the budget funds. So they spend a lot of funds for your special cabinets, etc. But the kids should have the access to the inclusion. We're talking about. We were talking about your secret visit, and you even didn't pay for the rental price for the theater, for young theater. And this is true, but it's not fun. Do not please smile, but the price of inclusion for every family is the specific. We do have lots of families or those who are not available to bring to that orphanages the kids. And I am the initiator of this amendment. And I have a question.
So now you don't have any more administrative resources. What is going to happen to your project? And how many of the charity funds you are going to invest into the inclusive development in the Zaporizhia region for your pilot project? Thank you very much for this question. And for me, the implementation of the inclusive education has become the integral part of my life, and I'm going to continue to deal with it for the inclusive education all over Ukraine, not only in the Zaporizhia region. And I am proud of the fact that for 3 years of working with this project, we have implemented, which started basically in the Zaporizhia region, and we did it together with the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine. It was kind of spread, and it covered all of the other regions. And now we have the opportunity to have at the same desk for those children with special educational needs is implemented in many children in Ukraine. And I do not take the politicization. I do not tolerate the politicization of this question when you would like to make a kind of reproach to me. This inclusive education, it's an issue that should be implemented at the state level. And this has been done as a part of state institution, but not as private business project. And where I had this opportunity as a pilot project manager at the first project, which should be the demonstration, how it should work and how it should look like, and mediatics and resource rooms and inclusive resource centers, I did those pilot projects at my own expense. For them to try and show how it should work and how it should be, covering all of the other regions of Ukraine. But this is state institution, one more time, I repeat, and extremely important that people, the society, should understand and should take this into account, that this is the integral part of the civilized world. Inclusive education should be implemented in Europe, in all of the world around, starting from 1970s. It has already been implementing, and they cannot imagine how it is to separate these children with special education needs from other kids, and how to make the educational process closed for them. And that is why it is extremely important for the Ukrainian society today to get rid of political sympathies or antipathies and paid attention to the child's problems and who actually need this aid from Ukrainian society. And I am grateful to all of our educational team, of my supporters, because I couldn't have done it without them. I express my sincere gratitude to all of the Ukrainian teachers who believed in this inclusive reform, who joined it, and who actually made it true by their own hands, by their own competencies, by their own skills. And I am convinced that in 3 years, the number of children who went to comprehensive secondary schools, to the same classes with children of the same age, it increased from 2,500 up to 17,000 children with special educational needs who are taught at comprehensive schools. This is a real achievement. This is a real result that shows, that advocates for itself, and this process is irreversible. And I also express my gratitude to the parents who believed in the system and let their children go to these schools. And I think this process will be improved. It will be upbringing the new generation of those free, unbiased people who will be more tolerant, kinder to each other, and together they will make a better future for our country. So the time is up, unfortunately, and I should express my gratitude for this discussion. And those people who have more questions, you can approach if we have some time during the break, you can ask your questions. Thank you very much for the participants, and I think we had a very nice and productive discussion.
Thank you for all participants for this interesting discussion. Now we kindly ask the speakers to stay at the platform for the group picture. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we kindly ask you to stay at your seats, and then in a few minutes we will continue with the last discussion platform. So we kindly ask you